I am Peter Christ. I'm one of the co-founders of LEAP, which stands for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was formed back in 2002 to bring a voice to law enforcement on drug policy reform. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. We are a membership organization. If you agree with what we say here today and you want to do a little bit more than just agree, you can sign the form, print your name, your email address, and your zip code on the form on the table over there, and you will be put on our mailing list. Doesn't cost anything. If you want to join, you can sign up and pay $25 for a year membership, but that's your choice. But it gives you puts you on our mailing list so you can keep in touch with what's going on. And we share our mailing list with no one. And we very seldom, maybe one email a month we send out just to remind people about stuff that's going on. And one other thing, if you do sign up today at one of these presentations and become a supporter, you'll leave here with one of these little gold lapel pin badges. And why we think these are important is this is sometimes a little difficult issue to bring up and talk about, but if you got one of these little gold badges on, I'm sure somebody's going to ask you, what's that? And my attitude is, heck, if somebody's going to ask you something, you can answer anything you want to, so that's your choice, all right? So that's that. Who am I? I'm a retired police captain. I worked for 20 years for the town of Tonawanna Police Department. It's a suburb of the city of Buffalo. And for any of you wondering if I was the captain, what did the other four guys do in the town of? It was a little bit bigger than that. We served a community of roughly 85,000 people. We had about 120 officer police department. I came in as a rookie patrolman in 1969, and I retired as a patrol captain in 1989. And then immediately got involved in the issue that I'm going to be talking about today, which is drug policy, because I saw the failure of this policy every day that I worked, and I saw the harm that it was doing to the society that I live in and to my profession. And what that policy is the policy of prohibition. We are law enforcement against prohibition. Now, I'm going to be talking primarily about drug prohibition today, but we are not limited to just that. We are against a policy within a free society that prohibits consensual adult behavior. When you have things that consenting adults want to do together and you prohibit that behavior, the people that want to do it don't stop doing it. They just hide it now. And it does, and it goes on. And you also create crime in your society because this consensual adult behavior, I just want to be clear about what I mean by consensual adult behavior. Go along with me on this, will you? Just go along with me on this.
Ken, yes.
You got me? You can, just go along with me.
All right, got it.
Remember we were talking before about how we'd like to beat somebody up? Remember we were having that conversation before about how we'd like to beat somebody up? Do you want to be beaten up?
I don't think so.
Oh, he doesn't want to be beaten up. Now, we are consenting adults and we want to beat somebody up. If we beat him up, is that a consensual adult act?
No.
No, that's an assault, and where we belong is in prison. I got an idea. Why don't we run a hall, put a ring in the middle of it, and sell tickets to people to come and watch us beat each other up? What do we call it? Professional prize fight, right? Do people get injured every year doing that? Yeah. Do people die every year doing that? Yeah. We regulate and control it because we tried to ban it at the beginning of the 20th century. We called it the blood sport. And we tried to wipe out boxing in this country. And you know what happened? The death rate went up. Because instead of having the boxing match downtown St. Albans in a hall with a doctor at the ringside, now the boxing match was in some barn out in the country someplace, and if somebody got hurt, everybody split because it was against the law. So we decided it's better to regulate and control this behavior to make it as safe as possible for the people that want to do it. Drug policy. We have a drug policy in this country. Nixon kicked it off in the 1970s, and he gave it a title. He called it the War on Drugs. We have some military people here, I'm sure. If somebody's going to send you off to war, what's the next thing you want to know? And that is, what does victory look like? Right? You want to know, what does a win look like? How do we know when the war's over? We had a war between 1941 and 45 that this country was involved in with many other nations. We and the Allies won that war. That doesn't mean that every 6 months or so we got to fight the Japanese and the Chinese and the Italians again. It's won, it's over, it's done. So I'm going to use that definition of war for the drug war. And that means we're going to win this war when we've eliminated drugs from our society. Heroin has been removed from the dictionary. Marijuana is gone. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Anybody here believe that's possible? Raise your hand. I'm going to shock you with this. I see as many raised hands here as every place else I've ever asked that question. Of course that's not possible. So why do we use terms like drug-free and zero tolerance? If drugs are always going to be part of our society, there's only one question that we need to ask, and that is, who's going to run the marketplace? Is it going to be gangsters, thugs, and terrorists, or is it going to be licensed, regulated, and controlled business people? Which sounds better to you?
Number two.
Number two. Of course. But that would be legalization. That would be legalizing drugs. We can't do that. That's condoning, isn't it? Doesn't it send that message to the kids? If we legalize drugs, we're condoning it. We're saying they're okay. Isn't that what we're saying? Anybody here smoke cigarettes? No. That's good. That's good. That's good. I want to applaud all of you. How many people here used to smoke cigarettes?
I used to.
Yeah, okay. Do you remember when you used to smoke cigarettes and you were condoned? You remember those days? When every table in this room would have an ashtray on it? You remember those days? You remember getting on an airplane in LA and smoking in the smoking section all the way to New York? Condoned. Condoned cigarette smokers were. You ask any cigarette smoker today whether they feel condoned, and they'll tell you they feel barely tolerated by the rest of society. And that is a perfectly legal drug in every state in the union, but it's not condoned. So just because we legalize something doesn't mean we condone it. It means we understand what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. The drug czar the other day gave a speech in front of some reporters. And my lovely wife was sitting on the couch as he was doing this, and when he said this line that I'm going to repeat, she stuck her fingers in her ears. Because she knew I was going to be screaming at the television. Because he said, we understand that this drug problem is fundamentally an educational and a healthcare problem. This is the drug czar. Can you tell me what other educational and healthcare problem in America do we spend $70 billion on the criminal justice system to deal with? Can you name one? I can't think of any. If it's an educational and healthcare problem, our money should be spent on education and healthcare, not on the criminal justice system. If you're an alcoholic and you live in America, and I don't mean you're in recovery, I mean you're drinking every day alcohol, but you don't drink and drive, and you don't harm other people or other people's property, what do we do to you?
Nothing.
Nothing. What do we do for you?
Nothing.
Oh, a lot of stuff. Guarantee you a purity of product, don't we? You don't wonder what's in that bottle when you buy that bottle at the liquor store. You know what's in there. There's no rat poison mixed with it or anything like that. You know what's in there. We give you a safe place to purchase and use that product in. Licensed taverns, liquor stores, stuff like that. And treatment on demand. Anybody that wants to stop tomorrow, go to AA meeting, start up, boom, you're on your way. Now let's talk about another American citizen, the heroin addict. Like our alcoholic, uses every day, but doesn't use and drive, and doesn't hurt other people or other people's property. What do we do to them? We catch them, we arrest them. And we hang a felony conviction on them. Possession of heroin in every state is a felony. And there's one thing we say at LEAP all the time: you can recover from your addiction. You never recover from your conviction. That goes with you to every job interview you go to for the rest of your life. What about purity of product? Who knows what you're buying out there on the street? What about a safe place to purchase and use in? I'm going to give you a little advice. This Friday night, if you're planning on taking the family out for dinner, I'd like to say that I would not suggest you take them to a crack house. A tavern, safe place for the family. A crack house, not so safe. Okay? And what about treatment? Well, if you're a heroin addict, you've got to admit to two things. One, I'm an addict, and two, I'm a criminal. It pushes people away from treatment. by criminalizing this behavior. We have to end this policy. We have to move to a regulated and controlled marketplace so we can have control over purity, age limits, distribution. Now, I have people say to me, well, I understand the marijuana thing, but you would legalize heroin and methamphetamine? I'm going to quote a retired police chief from down in Florida named Jerry Cameron, one of our speakers. And this is how he answers that question. It's real simple. Whichever drugs you once sold on the street corners of your community by 13-year-old children, you keep that drug illegal, and that's who will be selling it. I personally don't want 13-year-old children selling drugs on any street corners in America. Therefore, we have to regulate and control all of them and take them out of the hands of the gangsters and thugs. Will drug use go up if we legalize drugs? Well, I look around this room and I see all these potential crack users sitting right now. You're just waiting, aren't you? Aren't you all just waiting for that person to hit that crack pipe? Of course not. Of course not. Let me give you an example. Have you noticed over the last couple years, there all of a sudden in America appears to be gay people everywhere? Have you noticed that? It wasn't like this 10 years ago. 10 years ago, there wasn't any gay people in America at all. Now they're every place. Now, the only reason there could be more gay people is if people are changing from straight to gay. That's the only way there could be more, right? But we all know that isn't happening. The only thing that changed was the rest of us stopped being jerks about it, and now these people are willing to expose themselves and say, this is who I am. There isn't one more gay people in America than there was 10 years ago. They're just more visible. When we legalize drugs, you're all going to be shocked at how many drug users you all know. Because everybody in this room knows an illegal drug user. I guarantee you. You may not know you know an illegal drug user, but trust me, either at the workplace, at the school, at wherever in your family, trust me, they're there. They just don't say that that's who they are because it's illegal. And if they have a problem with it, we can't get them any help because they hide and they don't tell us who they are. We have to change this policy. Is this unusual? No. Let me give you an example of a couple different policies throughout our history in America that we followed for a long time that were never, ever good ideas. Slavery. Slavery was a stupid idea. Not only was slavery a stupid idea morally, that one human being would treat another human being like that, but slavery is an economic stupid policy. How many people here have children? Okay, how many people, raise your hands if you want your children to live with you forever? You know why? Human beings are too expensive to own. It's much more sensible for me to buy 40 hours of your time, pay you the money, let you figure out where you're going to live and what you're going to eat, than it is to own you. So it not only was a stupid policy morally, it was also economically a stupid policy. But we did it for 100 years. And then we ended it. Hey, hooray for us, and what did we replace it with? 100 years of segregation. We might have a cure for cancer today if we hadn't had segregation for 100 years. Who knows what geniuses we pushed off to the side and we lost the benefit of their knowledge and what they could have brought us. But we did it for 100 years. Then we ended it. Brown versus Board of Education. And the population in the White House right now shows that we've come a long way. And then I want to thank a group of people, women, for studying real hard and finally, by 1920, becoming intelligent enough to vote. Now, there's only one of two possibilities. Either women were too stupid to vote before 1920, or for 150 years, we had a policy in effect that stopped women from voting. Now, if I have to explain to any of the men in this room which one of those is true, there's no point. And don't go home tonight. But we all know better. And I also want to mention something to the women. Every person that voted for you to have a right to vote was a man. And you know what that tells you about us men? You're right. We're slow. But don't give up on us. Stick with us. We'll get it eventually. okay? Stupid policy, 100 years of slavery, 100 years of segregation, 150 years. We've only been doing this stupid policy for 40. We only did alcohol prohibition for 13 years, and we finally woke up. How many people believe that we legalized alcohol in 1933 because a new scientific study came out and told us that we were simply wrong about alcohol? It's really wonderful stuff and you should give it to your kids. Anybody think that that's the reason we legalized alcohol? No. We only legalized alcohol for one reason. We do the same thing in 1933 about alcohol that we do in 1920, and that's what a dangerous substance that is when people use it. But you know what we learned? As dangerous as alcohol is, prohibition was worse, because it created a huge underground economic system that we couldn't touch. No matter how many people we arrested, somebody else stepped right in to take the job over, because there was just too damn much money in it. You tell any good capitalist that there's $500 billion laying out there for you to get your hands on, but don't touch it because it's illegal drugs. That's what the UN says the worldwide national drug or international drug trade is, $500 billion a year. Let's say that we knock off 60% of that by legalizing marijuana. That only knocks it down to $200 billion a year. I'm sure nobody will go after that, right? It's only $200 billion. Of course not. People are going to continue to do it. Marijuana is a stopgap. It's good that you passed that law, but it's a stopgap. It's not far enough. The federal government regulates drugs. They have a drug schedule. Schedule 1 drugs are banned. You cannot use them, you cannot sell them, you cannot manufacture them, you cannot even do research on them. They are banned. Schedule 2 drugs, what's his name, that radio guy and his oxycodone that he was talking about? Oh yes, that guy. Yeah. That's Schedule 2 drugs. The drugs he was using, tightly regulated prescription. Schedule 3, regulated prescription drugs. Schedule 4, regulated over-the-counter, no need for a prescription. Section 5, everything else. Aspirin, Alka-Seltzer, all that stuff, regulated by the FDA. If we eliminate Schedule 1, if we simply tell the federal government, you cannot prohibit any drugs. You can regulate the hell out of them, you just can't prohibit them, we will have legalized drugs. And let me give you an example of that happening in all of our lifetime. About 12 years ago in this country, we had a huge prohibition argument about a pill. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, so I'll try to define the pill from both sides. It's either the morning after pill or the baby killing pill, depending on where you look at it from. One side yelled, we can't have that pill in America, it should be prohibited. The other side yelled, people have a right to access this pill. We decided to make it legal under the prescription drug program. So in order to buy that pill, you would have to go to a doctor, get a permission slip, a prescription, and then you could have the pharmacist sell you the pill. 2 years ago, the FDA, after seeing it under that regulation for about 8 years, took it off prescription. And they said now it's a Schedule 4 drug, all you have to do is have proof that you're age 17 or older and you can buy it without a prescription. We couldn't have made that regulatory change if we had to settle the prohibition argument 12 years ago. This is not giving us anything we want. We have the largest prison system on the planet Earth. Roughly a third of those cells are filled by non-violent drug offenders. And we have one of the most efficient prison systems on the planet. You hardly ever hear of anybody escaping. We put you in there, that's where you stay. Anybody want to take a guess at how many drug-free prisons we have? 0. And I want you to remember that the next time you drive by your local high school and look at that sign. You know, the one that says drug-free school? We don't have one drug-free prison. Not one. Not even the Supermax prison. They all got a drug problem inside of them. So we talk about drug-free in a free society where there's a building, a prison full of people that have lost all their liberties and you can't even keep drugs out of there? And you think you can keep them out of a free society? We call this policy, the government calls it drug control policy. Well, let me tell you something. As soon as you institute a prohibition, don't use the word control anymore. Because you don't control anything that goes on in the underworld. They do it the way they want to do it, and that's the way they do it. We don't control anything about drugs. We occasionally nip at the edges and arrest some people, We've made all the big, over the last 20 years, we've made huge, big cartel arrests down in South America. Anything changed? What about all those people we locked up? Shouldn't that have ended? No. Too much money in it. If Budweiser has a dispute with Miller, where do they go? To court. Drug dealers have a dispute, they go to the streets. Because they don't have access to the court system because they're illegal. We have to end this. The only way bad things continue is when good people stay silent. You have to speak out on this. It's for you, it's for your kids, it's for this country. I particularly am concerned about it because of my old profession, because we're the ones that are on the front line of this war, dying for nothing. This has to come to an end. As I said, if you want to support us, fill out the form at the end, get your little gold badge. If you want to help us more, that would be wonderful. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
So for those who are watching on cable access, is there an email or a website that you can go to sign up as well?
Well, ironically, there is. leap.cc, or if you type in copsaylegalizedrugs.com, it takes you to the same website, either one of those. Or to make it real easy, Google the word LEAP, and we are either the first or the second thing that pops up. There's now a thing out there called Leap Motion that sometimes knocked us out of first spot, but we're using the first thing that pops up. That's how you get a hold of it. Yes, sir.
I've had similar discussion with a number of people, thinking that we're sort of ridiculous. We spend all this money on trying to control drugs, which we don't. But you get a number of health professionals together in a room, and they are like almost 100% against your position. And it looks like a group that we would have to persuade or educate or do something to really gain anything, because it's very tough to fight against a number of health professionals when you're saying legalize drugs.
Something happened in this country in 1915 called the Harrison Narcotics Act. And in 1916 it was followed by something else called the Prescription Drug Program. And that fundamentally changed the relationship between doctors and patients. And the reason I say that is this. You're all listening to me, I'm just giving my point of view on this, right? If when you go to leave this room, I'm standing at the door and I tell you, you can't leave here unless I tell you you can. Has that changed our relationship? Prior to 1916, doctors were medical advisors to their patients. After 1916, they were permission givers to their patients. That's when they got control of the pharmacy. And nobody that has control of anything likes to give it up. See, the reason why so many of us cops want to give it up is because we don't have any control over it. We're just bank dancing around the edges. The doctors have a vested interest in keeping it the way it is, and I understand their position. The problem is we have to deal with this as a healthcare issue. And that means that we're going to have to accept the reality of addiction. We do, as I mentioned before, with alcoholics. We don't bother you if you're an alcoholic. We make sure that you got a safe drug that you're taking and stuff like that. Give you a safe place to buy it in. But then if you want to destroy your life, destroy your life. That's your business. Let me give you an example about the transition on that. And I know it's quitting time here, but I started on the police department in February of 1969. I made my first DWI arrest in the summer of 1970, almost a year and a half after I came on the job. I bet you there ain't a cop out there today that doesn't make his first DWI arrest the first week he's out the road. Today. I brought that guy in cuffs into the station. And I immediately started taking heat from my senior officers, who said things to me like, "Hey, you drink too, don't you? What are you bothering that poor slob for?" Okay, that was the attitude in police work. And then a little organization formed up in the late 70s, and they were very angry. In fact, they were so angry they called themselves MAD. And they were Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And if you remember when that started, the first group that they went after was us, law enforcement. And they said, "Do your job." Now, the reason I'm giving you all this is this. We legalized alcohol in '33, and we went on almost a 50-year bender pretending we didn't have an alcohol problem in this society. Any of you people here watch the Mad Men on television? Anybody? Every time they go to an office, somebody's giving them a drink, that's how it was in the 50s and the 60s. Okay? We changed that drastically now. by holding people responsible for their actions, not by banning anything, but by holding people. I don't want us to legalize drugs and then go on a 50-year bender pretending we don't have a drug problem. We have to legalize drugs, and then we have to knuckle right down and start dealing with the drug problem. And fundamentally it is, as the drug czar said, a healthcare and education position. And one real quick thing, and I know I'm over. Here's what LEAP has changed in the dynamic of this discussion since we were formed in 2002. Prior to 2002, if you were going to have a debate in your community about drug policy, what you would do is you would get the local prosecutor or the local judge or the local narc to be at one podium to defend the policy. And then over at the other podium, you'd put the crazy hippie who said, hey man, drugs are cool, everybody ought to party. Now, it's not hard to figure out who's going to win that debate. Let me tell you how that dynamic has changed, thanks to LEAP. Let's say you're going to put the primary spokesman for our current drug policy at the one podium, the drug czar, a guy by the name of Kulikowski. All right? You know who we're going to put at the other podium? Wait a minute. Kulikowski, before he was drug czar, was chief of police of Seattle, Washington. And then he became drug czar. You know who we're going to put at the other podium? A guy by the name of Norm Stamper. And Norm Stamper retired as chief of police of Seattle, Washington, when Kulikowski took the job. So now it's which chief of police you're going to listen to, not are you going to listen to the crazy hippie or are you going to listen to the drug czar. All right? That's the difference we're bringing to it. We are not condoners. We know the problems that drugs cause in our society. We understand it better than you do. We lived it. When the problems were going down, we were there. We know. But we also know that the prohibition is causing more problems in our society than the drugs do. And that's why it has that. Yes, sir.
Can I ask one more question, and that is, looking at a country like the Netherlands, as far as I understand it, has legalized all drugs.
I'll correct you in a second. Go ahead.
But I'm just
You're on the
curious
right
what the anecdotal evidence coming out of the Netherlands is as to whether it was good policy or not.
Okay, well, first off, let me tell you about the marijuana is illegal in the Netherlands. It's just that they don't arrest anybody for it. They don't bother people in like sell in cafes. They can't legalize it because they are signers of the international treaty that prevents any of the signers of that treaty from legalizing any of these drugs. Another barrier we have to overcome is the UN in this thing. First age use in the Netherlands for marijuana, 17. First age use for marijuana in the United States, 13. Huge reduction in the amount of heroin users in that state. Because see, marijuana is a gateway drug, but it's not a gateway to other drugs, it's a gateway to the underground. That's what it's a gateway to. There's that old saying that 90% of the people that are on heroin start out on marijuana. Yeah, and 100% of the people on heroin start out on milk, so obviously we have to ban milk. Okay? So you can use statistics any way you want to play it. Portugal has decriminalized drugs across the board. Has seen a huge, for one of the things they've seen is a huge decrease in AIDS and hepatitis transference because nobody's sharing needles anymore. They all get their dose in a needle from the clinic that gives it to them or whatever. They've seen more people going into recovery because every time they come in to get their dose, they get have a little pamphlet say, you know, if you want to quit, you can come in and quit. And it's all very friendly. It's people like each other. Nobody's calling each other scum or anything like that. And they're having great success with it in Portugal. You're seeing incremental gaps. Big thing, you know, in fact, we are working now, we just got turned down the second time to get a non-government organization membership of the UN so we can start having a voice to the UN. We got to go back in January and try again. So we're trying to do that. We are, by the way, an international organization. Our board of directors, one of them is a retired judge from down in Brazil, Maria Kram. Another one is used to work for MI5 over in England. I can't think of her name right now, Marilyn. And she's on our board of directors. We have a Canadian member of our board of directors. So we understand that this is not just an American issue, but trust me, if America changed, the rest of the world would jump right on board real quick. We're the ones that are pushing this thing.
Peter, there's a question behind you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Peter. I wonder if you know what the statistics are for the percentage of law enforcement officers that are killed or wounded on duty in drug intervention.
The closest statistics I saw was out of the total number that are killed during the course of a year, roughly about 20 to 25%, depending on the year, are from drug interactions. That's the closest one I saw. I don't know if it's valid or not. I'm just saying that's the only one that I can tell proof there. When we started at the beginning, they did a study at the beginning of the 20th century in Navy side. That study came out and said that 1.3% of Americans are addicted. You know what that statistic is today? 1.3% are addicts. And that's the other thing you have to understand real quickly. The drug dealers are not making their money off the addicts. Just like the tavern owner doesn't make their money off the alcoholics. They make their money off the casual drug users, the people that do it a little bit on the weekend and stuff like that never become addicts. The addiction rate for all these drugs is roughly 10 to 15% of the people that use them will become addicted. We have this theory in mind that everybody that uses heroin is a heroin addict. It simply is not the case. Yes, sir.
Just a question on jails, as they're kind of a free enterprise and there's kind of big money in owning a jail and they get paid a lot. And since you said there was like 30% of the people in jail are drug addicts, is there a lot of fight back on the people who own jails and the counties who run that stuff to not accessfully keep people in?
When I was a cop, I used to say this is a great job. And this would be a perfect job if we worked on commission. Give me a gunpowder and commission, man, that's a great job. We now have, as you just said, private prisons in America. We have profit-making prisons in America that are owned by private companies and making a profit off it. Let me tell you something, at least in the America I want to live in, it should never be anybody making a profit off of depriving somebody of their liberty. That should not be a profit-making thing. That should be something that costs us money to do. And then, because if it costs us money to have these prisons running, then we're going to start really thinking about how many we need and how many people we want to lock up. If we can ship it off to some other private industry, then we can let it go on forever. So that is part of that. This is certainly part of it. There's a lot of things, and that is only that privately owned prisons. That's only been the last 20 years or so. That's it. That never, all the prisons were owned by the state or the county or whatever. Everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Because of your international travels, what country do you find has the least amount of this violation of the use of drugs?
My guess would probably be Switzerland. Well, they went to a heroin maintenance program and a whole different drug attitude about 15 years ago. And they have probably about the least amount. They have, when I mentioned AIDS and hepatitis, their AIDS and hepatitis transference has dropped down from about 70% to about 3%. Okay? Because people aren't sharing needles anymore. Portugal's had there's a lot of success stories to read about it. The thing about it, anybody know what the very first prohibition was that we have any historical record of? Anybody know?
Sex.
It started with these words. Do not eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. First prohibition. Zero tolerance, by the way. Little bite, big bite, makes no difference, you're out of the garden. How many people had to be watched to make that prohibition work? 2. How many trees of knowledge were there in the garden? 1. I could have made that prohibition work. I would have put a fence around a tree, put a chair out in front of the fence, said, go on, get out of here, you can't have any. That would have been the end of it. Do you know why it didn't work? It tells you right in that book, Genesis, why it didn't work. Because it says in that book that after the Creator created the people, the Creator granted something to the people. And that was called free will. The right to make these choices their own. When we pass prohibition laws like this, we're trying to eliminate that free will. It's not our function as a society. Morality is something for you to decide, for yourself, not for society to decide for you. It amazes me, what's her name, that blonde conservative lady that's on television all the time? Ann Coulter? Ann Coulter? Got to get the government off the people's back, right? The government's the problem. We got to get the government out of the way, and because the government is causing all the problems. But the government should tell you what drugs you can take. Now, how do you keep those two ideas inside one head all at the same time? I don't understand that. If you really believe in liberty, I was warned not to touch on this, but I think I have to. I want to congratulate Vermont, because a couple weeks ago you legalized murder, and I want to thank you for that. You did. If a doctor assisted a suicide a month ago, he would have been charged with manslaughter or murder. Now you say if these are two consenting adults and they both want to do this together, it's simply none of anybody else's business. Now, we may want to regulate it. We may want to make sure that both sides are consenting and stuff like that, just to make sure that nobody's out there killing people. But if that's what these people want to do, then what you do is, I'll give you another bizarrely stupid thing that human beings just like us do. Do you know there are human beings just like us? And this maims and kills people every year. When they see a tall, icy mountain, the first thought that comes into their head is, I ought to climb up on top of that mountain, tie 2 slippery boards to my feet, push myself off the edge. Now that's insane! Why would it? That should be banned. But besides Vermont going broke, if we banned it, what else would happen? And I'll tell you what else would happen. The people who wanted to do that wouldn't stop doing it. But they wouldn't do it on groomed slopes anymore with safety people nearby, and more people would die and more people would be injured. So no matter how crazy the behavior is, we accept it, we regulate and control it, and make it as safe as possible for the people who want to be involved. And that's what you do in a free society. Thank you all very much for your time. I'll be over to the